Sometimes I really don't know what it means to, what's art and what's not. But I was really young, and we had a best friend in Sweden, and we went out to the woods, and there was a fallen log that looked like a horse. So we made this thing into a horse, and then imagine flying through the universe to Pluto. And my friend would stay on, and we had an imaginary rope where I went out and explored in the universe and brought back these objects until they built a house there and then excavated, and our thing was gone. I'm not sure that was really art, but I think what it was understanding imagination, or understanding how things can be transformed from one thing to the other. And I think if we assume one thing, especially the way we're living now and how ideas are so fixed, I think early on, because I had so much freedom when I grew up in Sweden, that things easily went from being one thing to another, just because, when you're young, that's how you think. And I think, maybe being an artist, it gives you that kind of freedom as well to really think. That was really where I started to understand that objects, materials have language and they have power. And depending upon how they're used, juxtaposed, and contextualized, that you can change that meaning. And then I was hooked, and that was it. That's knew what I was going to do for the rest of my life. I don't know if I called myself an artist. I don't think any of those labels really meant something, didn't mean anything to me in any case. I just knew that living in this way, making things and putting it out, causing some kind of interruption to people's everyday lives in a way, that was really important. And whether something was really beautiful or awkward or in the wrong place, didn't make sense, or the scale was off, I didn't label it. I just knew that there was some kind of, that kind of language had power. I started in weaving, and then I went to apprentice in Sweden for a year, and then I got a job in Iran for 2 years with the United Nations Handicraft Development Program. And there I researched in Kurdistan on the border of Iran and Iraq, and I lived there for 2 years, and then went overland through Afghanistan and India into northern Kashmir and into Ladakh. But it was interviewing people then about what, like when you were little, this cloth, what were some of the designs on that cloth? So I did that research traveling all over Kurdistan, and then I took that and I started to make some designs, and I taught young weavers, girls actually, because men were off in the oil fields and construction sites at that point, and they did the handloom weaving. I applied to graduate school from that, and I went to Cranbrook and to study. And then the work really changed. I came in having all these, ideas about textiles that I had seen. I joined the Kurdish migration, and I saw how, tents were made in a certain way. And so I started to think about like membrane of filters. Everywhere in the world right now, people are using every bit of material to figure out what a home is and what a shelter is. And they're not doing that because that's what they want to be doing. They're doing it out of necessity, because of the environment, because of political reasons. And so people are constantly on the move. This is photographed 2:00 in the morning, walking down to the Sangam. This is at the Kumbh Mela. It's the largest gathering of humans on the planet. And so this is a temporary tent. And this is actually someone that has a store during the daytime. And they've just pulled down the plastic for the night, and they're having their dinner, and there's light inside. But all the things that they sell are visible from the other side. Those are the shadows there. This one's called Nightlife, and it looks like it's black and white, but obviously there's nuance and grayscale in here. This is a translation of an image, and it's software at this point that translates this. It's not, a jacquard weave that was invented in the latter part of the 1800s. It was each thread had a hole in a punch card. This is no longer a punch card. This is software that takes the pixels. Actually, some people say that, the jacquard is the precursor to the computer, because you're talking about X's and O's, really. So each thread is a dot. And in this case, you're just translating a digital file to a digital software that there are 12 colors in the that makes up the image, and it just figures out what that is. The key to it is to figure out what materials to make it. So it seems like it's a really easy thing. You push the button and out it comes, but it's just not, because you have to figure out if it's a flat weave, if it's a relief weave, is it silk, is it cotton, is it mix, is it wool? And we went back and forth with these, I can't tell you how many times, to figure out just how best to interpret it. I mean, I think the software does one interpretation and then the human eye does the rest. But how to get that luminosity, that's what we went back and forth with. And that silk is the only thing. Silk is a protein fiber like wool is. And it reflects the light in a very different way, and where cotton would absorb it. This piece in particular, called Red Tent, and many of the tents that were there were just empty. And they were empty, and you didn't necessarily know why. Had something happened there? Is it about to happen? But that space of anticipation where there's supposedly nothing happening, well, that nothing, of course, is everything. And so the richness of that nothing is what I'm really, really interested in sort of pursuing. And I think with this other work where there's photographs of fabric, and then that's woven, but the fabric itself, it's a photograph of it. So the weaving, the weaving structure is not what that cloth is made up of. So there is that, it's not necessarily an illusion, but what it is, it's a confusion of what am I seeing? Like, is that really a fold? You know, some people will go up and see it. And so again, there's that space where you're halted. And, you know, in one way you have to sort of trick people, you know, in some way. Not trick, but, you know, you use beauty or you use texture or something that is not what you're used to. So, I mean, for instance, these are all microscopic images of a project that I involved 20 artists around the world to do a walk of compassion, and to send me water back, because I'd been to Mount Kailash in Tibet and collected water from the Lake of Compassion there, and I looked at it microscopically, and I thought, oh, that'll just take, you know, a year or so. Well, it was not that at all. It was much longer, only because people who collected the water not only did that, but they made work, they did research, they did, you know, sent all this back to me, and I felt I had an obligation to really do something. So I archived on a website, but then we made a book out of it. I do a lot with other people, and I said, oh, I'm never going to do that again. It's too much work. But I do, and I love it. And yes, sometimes it's like putting an octopus to bed, but you know, it's in the end, it's worth it. And one leg is always going to be out there. You know, it's never going to be perfect. I've been at this long enough to know that when I really hate it, or I don't like it, or I get afraid, or I'm thinking that it's a really stupid idea, I just have to keep going, you know, to get past that. It's like sitting in meditation and your mind will not stop. At some point, it does. I'm very slow when I make something. I have so many backstories and so much time, and I wish I could work faster, but I don't. I just have to follow and trust it. I'm very accepting of very stupid ideas that I just have to go through and look at and not judge it. Because if I stop when I judge myself, I would never make anything, ever. I mean, ever. I wouldn't even pick up a camera or a thread or a pencil, because I think we're so quick to assume it's bad and you shouldn't do it. And I remember from teaching, that was the hardest point. Just don't just make one, make 100. Just work. You know, the whole thing that work comes from work. It's that you say, oh, no, I know exactly what I'm going to make. I've thought it through. And I thought, oh, that's disastrous. You have no clue. You can't. If you have the idea and you think it's going to look that, it's never going to be that. And you hope it's never going to be that it's going to be something else. So those are the lessons you kind of have to take for yourself. You know, it's much easier to tell somebody else. But for me, I do that. I'm also, you know, how old am I? I'm 69 years old. So I don't really care. I mean, I'm just going to do what I'm going to do at this point. And, you know, and hopefully what I do, you know, can contribute. But there's no guarantee of any of that. And, you know, when you say contribute, that's always a funny word. It's not social services, you know, that's not what we do, but it's, I guess, contributing to a larger dialogue. I mean, I think it's up to us to create the context. I mean, there's a whole market side. I mean, we can talk about the market, but that's not as interesting. I mean, we know how that works. It's like anything else. You know, you make things, you put it up, people want to sell it. And it's really important. And yes, you know, art, you know, we should be paid for what we do, and hopefully people want to live with it. But I think it's also to help us think more broadly. If we're just teaching students to sell work, make work, and sell work, I think we're doing them a disservice. I mean, there is a poetics in what we do and how do we contribute. And I think that's, you know, that's as important as well. Not as well, I find it's the only reason, actually.